Warm greetings, dear ones, and welcome to Unity Church. Welcome to this time we set aside for worship each week, a time to help us find and keep our balance, to think about those things that matter most, to root out racism in ourselves and in the world, and to align our lives to integrity, service, and joy. As we reach out from the sanctuary today, we too miss being together in person. Despite the limitations, we hope you will enter in as fully as you can. Light a chalice, speak, and sing along. Call out the names of those in need. Let worship have its way with you until we are together again. Today we are again joined in the sanctuary by several members of the choir who will be singing our hymns and helping us to prepare for returning to worship in the sanctuary with all of us together in September. We thank those of you who are here with us today. After the service, whether this is your first time with us or you've been here your whole life, you are invited to participate in the Zoom coffee hour, where we share a bit of our lives with each other and get to know one another more deeply. Today is a special day that marks a turning point in this year of ours. It is a turning point from our ministerial farewells to ministerial hellos. Today we want to welcome back the Reverend Shea McKay, who has rejoined the Unity staff this week as our half-time coordinator of community outreach ministry teams and Unity's justice work. She will be with us throughout the interim year in this capacity. I want to note that she was last with us on the staff as an intern in 2015 and 16, but she has since been ordained by this congregation and has been serving 2 congregations out in Maine. She comes to us with a wealth of ministerial experience as well as her organizing experience, and she will bring spiritual depth to our community outreach ministry teams. Welcome home, Shea. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning. It is with great pleasure and lots of surprise that I find myself back among you. I was not seeking this out, but it was a blessing that it came to me, and I have now come to you. So I am very much looking forward to rediscovering this beautiful community as you rediscover yourselves coming out of COVID, and journeying with you through the next year. So thank you for the warm welcome, and to all of those watching, I look forward to seeing and meeting you again.
If you would like to learn more about Unity's social action work and our community outreach ministries and Unitarian Universalism in general, we invite you to participate in Finding Yourself at Unity today at 1 p.m. online. In this week's 1-hour program, Shea and I will both be on hand for the online class focused on our community outreach ministry teams. Come join us there. The deadline for applications to Unity's Board of Trustees has been extended until this fall. If you have felt a pull to deeper service to this community, or know someone else who has, please consider either serving or nominating someone to serve as a trustee. This week's small group spiritual practice, offered on Wednesday evening, is the practice of Lectio Divina, in which you are invited to join a small gathering of others that will be led in the reading of a poem and listening for what is found there. In the poetry, in the meanings, and the music of the poem, this is not an analysis or a discussion of poetry, but a contemplative way of listening to the poem and to one another and to what rises from our own hearts. Groups are available both online and in person here at Unity Church. If you're interested, please visit the website for information and to register. Also available on the website are details about the offerings shared this morning. Next Sunday, during a service titled The Abundance of Solidarity, please join the Reverend Ruth McKenzie and Worship Associate Ray Wiedmeyer in exploring what joining together in solidarity and inherent worth and dignity has to do with abundance. And once again, welcome to Unity Church. It is a joy to share this time together.
I have been privileged to have traveled to many different places around the globe and been blessed to have been surrounded by the abundance of the natural world. The glory of a Costa Rican rainforest, the lonely rolling moors of Devon, England, the wild tundra of Alaska. Yet I can only visit such places infrequently. I live in a small house in a city lot. But to keep me in right relationship with myself, with others, and the world, I need a more frequent engagement with nature. What keeps me grounded, in tune with abundance of nature, is what I find around my home and within my neighborhood. I know that if I wait until I'm out in the middle of a national park or a wilderness area, my spirit will wither. So I take a more local approach. Part of my spiritual practice is to recognize and engage the abundance of nature that surrounds my home in St. Paul. On many days, I have to admit that I can be distracted by that abundance that my yard yields in the form of a rather long to-do list, like mow the grass, trim the bushes, weed the flower beds, turn the compost, clean the leaves out from the gutter, along with something I really don't want to think about like right now, which is shoveling snow. Most days, I take some time to sit in the living room and look out the window. I listen for the keck, keck, keck of the merlins as they call out to each other. Watch the chipmunks fill their cheeks with spilled birdseed from underneath our feeders. Listen to the subtle sounds of the neighbors' cottonwoods as the leaves move with the rise of the breeze. Inhale the unmistakable fragrance of the May lilac blossoms and marvel at the brilliant red the cardinal imparts against the stark winter background. All of this fills me with joy and reminds me that I don't have to spend any money or travel far anywhere to live in the abundance of nature. So friends, find yourself in the abundance of this place, in this time. Listen for the bell call of the blue jay and the caw of the crow, and come worship together. Please join us in singing our opening hymn, number 76, For the Flowers That Bloom About Our Feet. And please join me in the unison reading The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come in the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Please join me in a few moments of silent meditation.
We celebrate the life and mourn the death of Deborah Olson, who died in the loving company of friends last Monday, July 5th, after a rapidly progressing journey with ALS this past year. Deb became more active at Unity while church services and programs have been online, so many members may have only met her in Zoom. Services are being planned at Unity this fall. We also hold in our thoughts Meredith Kramer, who is undergoing treatment for a rare eye condition causing progressive vision loss. We pray for healing and send our support to her family, rallying to help Meredith and Paul with Meredith's care and the care of their new baby, Nina. We hold Tai Yan Lee in our hearts as she recovers at home from injuries suffered in a car crash July 4th. I'm sorry, it's Tao Yan Lee. We send healing wishes and support. And we celebrate the birth of one more Redeemer. Unity Sanctuary guests Gausu Musa and Sherifatu Akibu joyfully welcome the blessing of their daughter, Alicia Gausu, on Monday, June 28th. Brothers 6-year-old Wali and 2-year-old Ganyu are delighted as well. Gausu and Sherifatu are profoundly grateful for the welcome and support that the Unity Church community has shown them. Lastly, we acknowledge all the currents of grief that flow around the world as lives are compromised or lost to both COVID-19 and systemic racism. As more and more of us are able to remove our masks, may we be emboldened to let our faces and our lives express our concern for one another and our commitment to do our part for the well-being of all. Spirit of life, help us to experience the abundance of nature that is all around us. In the stress and busyness of our lives, let us pause to really see the plants and animals, insects and birds that surround us with their grace. When the news of natural disasters and climate change threatens to derail us, remind us that there is also a lot around us that isn't going wrong. Allow us, as Wendell Berry writes, to rest in the grace of the world. Teach us that time spent nourishing our spirits by connecting with nature's abundance is never time wasted. When we tax ourselves with forethought of grief, may we take time to notice what is thriving. Amen.
Good morning, and a special welcome to all the families and children listening today. I remember the first time I sat in a movie theater through the end of all the credits, and to my surprise, there was an extra scene. It was exhilarating, not just because I didn't expect this, and not just because it was something extra, something more, but because the ending that I thought was limited by that boundary actually overflowed and continued on. Today, I'm going to tell a story about how creativity in unexpected or challenging circumstances can bubble up and overflow. And such abundance of creativity helps our narratives to continue on. As we do, come lean in a little closer to your screen to listen to the story today. In early March 2020, a few weeks before the pandemic shutdowns in the US, some of you will remember there were devastating tornadoes in the state of Tennessee and surrounding areas, the Super Tuesday tornadoes. One of the strongest tornadoes went through Nashville, moving at about 165 miles per hour. And as you can imagine, as you've likely heard, devastating homes, cars, trees, buildings, gardens. Thousands of people went without power, hundreds of people were injured, and dozens of people lost their lives. A dear UU minister, the Reverend Sarah Green, who was living near Nashville at the time, shared about the enormity of the destruction and the weight of the grief in the aftermath of the tornado. She realized it was really just luck that her and her family had survived. Of course, there were emergency response teams, officials and professionals and community members working together to try and support people and rebuild in the aftermath. And as an outsider, this is usually how the story ends. There's a disaster and there's disaster relief. A tragic and yet familiar story, and unfortunately, an increasingly familiar story as temperature extremes, as changes and as a result of climate change increase the conditions that cause natural disasters like tornadoes to occur. But the story for the people living in these communities, it doesn't end there. And a few weeks later, I saw an article with the Reverend Sarah Green on a picture on the front, standing next to a sign that read, "Community Garden." Sarah had made her way down to her old neighborhood in Nashville to check in with beloved friends and to take in what had occurred in this place. And as she was walking through the debris and feeling the weight of grief, she noticed that there was still a plot of land in this neighborhood that developers had not yet come in and built upon. There was an empty plot of land under the debris, and there was something that bubbled up inside her. She had an idea and a vision of a community garden right here, to bring this community together, something that they could build on. And she was surprised that this energy was building up inside her and overflowing. She was surprised that in the wake of this destruction and grief, that just came about. And she went to her neighbors and had conversations and shared the ideas and invited them to join her. And they were excited and brought their own creativity and energy, and they grabbed shovels and started digging up the dirt and building garden beds and planting flowers and vegetable seeds to grow. It's a beautiful story, but it doesn't end there either, because the neighborhood technically, legally, wasn't allowed to actually build on the land. They hadn't sought out permission. And so the man who managed the land was driving by one day and saw all of these people digging and was like, "What is going on?" And was frustrated and maybe a little confused. But as he got out of his car and walked towards them, he was taken aback by the creativity and generosity flowing out from them. And so as he got close enough to be heard, Instead, he said, hey, y'all can continue doing what you're doing, but who's over this? He was asking, whose idea was this? Who's organizing this? And that's when he met Sarah and listened to her story of how much she loved this neighborhood, saw how much the community desired to create something new, and not just something for them, but something that had the possibility to overflow and be enough for the wider community. His heart was touched and warmed. He had lost 3 buildings in the destruction of the tornado and found hope in this desire and movement and energy and creativity to build this garden. So he picked up a shovel and started digging and joined them in creating this community garden. But the article ends with a sentence that says, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the community garden project paused. In those early days and weeks and even months, we didn't really know how to gather in person together safely, even outside. I've looked a couple times, but I haven't heard about this garden again since. And so honestly, I don't know how this community has made their way through this year and continues to do so. I don't know what this land looks like or where this garden is today. But I think that there is another scene to come. I believe that this story continues on. So I invite you to wonder with me, to imagine with me what the abundance of this creativity, how it has moved and shaped this community and their story. It's true that we must acknowledge real limitations of resources, of destruction. We must acknowledge the grief in such moments. And let us allow creativity to bubble up and overflow, to surprise us, to change us, to continue to shape the stories we find ourselves in. May it be so, and amen.
Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. Though the future is unclear, we can't let fear undermine the strength of our ministry that we share. Please do your best to be generous with the church so that the church can in turn maintain our staff and programs and keep our promises to the many community partners that are a part of our Sunday offerings that we support. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Northwest Passage, an organization providing residential treatment for youth ages 12 through 17, using a program that blends traditional mental health interventions with art and nature-based therapies. Northwest Passage's In a New Light program is a therapeutic photography initiative emphasizing experiences in nature immersion with the goal of empowering struggling youth to define themselves by their strengths rather than see themselves through their weaknesses, and let them know that they have an awe-inspiring accomplishments. This collection will support their Artist in Residence program. During the interlude for the offering, please visit Unity's homepage or follow the link in the YouTube information section to make your contribution or to nominate an organization to receive the offering in the future. You can also mail a check to the church or use the Give function in Unity's membership app. And thank you so much for your ongoing generosity.
Blackbirds by Julie Cadwallader Staub. I am 52 years old and have spent truly the better part of my life out of doors. But yesterday I heard a new sound above my head, a rustling, ruffling quietness in the spring air. And when I turned my face upward, I saw a flock of blackbirds rounding a curve I didn't know was there, and the sound was simply all those wings, just feathers against air, against gravity, and such a beautiful winning, the whole flock taking a long, wide turn as if one body and one mind. How did they do that? Oh, if we lived only in human society with its cruelty and fear, its apathy and exhaustion, what a puny existence that would be. But instead we live and move and have our being here in this curving and soaring world, so that when, every now and then, mercy and tenderness triumph in our lives, and when, even more rarely, we manage to unite and move together toward a common good, we can think to ourselves, ah yes, this is how it's meant to be.
And this from A.R. Ammons, The City Limits. When you consider the radiance, that it does not withhold itself, but pours its abundance without selection into every nook and cranny not overhung or hidden. When you consider that birds' bones make no awful noise against the light, but lie low in the light, as if in high testimony. When you consider the radiance that it will look into the guiltiest swervings of the weaving heart and bear itself upon them, not flinching into disguise or darkening. When you consider the abundance of such resources as illuminates the blue glow bodies and gold-skeined wings of flies, swarming the dumped guts of a natural slaughter or the coil of shit, and in no way winces from its storms of generosity. When you consider that air or vacuum, snow or shale, squid or wolf, rose or lichen, each is accepted into as much light as it will take, then the heart moves roomier. The man stands and looks about. The leaf does not increase itself above the grass, and the dark work of the deepest cell is of a tune with May bushes. And fear, lit by the breath of such, calmly turns to praise.
One of the silver linings of the pandemic for many of us has been increased time spent in nature. I am no exception. Although I live on a small farm and spend a lot of time outdoors, I didn't take a lot of time to intentionally be out in nature. Like Rebecca, my time outdoors was often dominated by my to-do list. Since last year, though, like many people, my partner Abe and I found ourselves bored and in need of things to do. We started going hiking a few nights a week after work. It was a stress reliever and helped keep the stir-crazy at bay. Since last year, though, we've explored most of the hiking within half an hour of our house. We've discovered it's the one activity we do together where no matter what condition we start in, we're in a pretty good place by mile 3 or 4. It sets the tone for a relaxed or a productive evening. We like each other better. I've always had a bit of a complicated relationship with spending time outdoors. Despite having a degree in horticulture and having been a full-time farmer for a few years, I would not categorize myself as a classically outdoorsy person. I have always been a bookworm and a crafter, and my go-to activities are curling up with a book or a knitting or sewing project. But I've also known since an early age that getting outside and tuning into the natural world makes me a better human. My parents owned a nursery when I was growing up, which was just outside our back door. It is not a metaphor to say that plants served as the backdrop to my childhood. A lot of really beautiful plants. Being a kid, it was an experience that I totally took for granted and didn't appreciate, but those plants worked their magic on me anyway. As a kid, I was a great builder of forts. I went around the neighborhood collecting cast-off Christmas trees to serve as construction material. My creativity served me well as I made lots of mud pies and other inedible delicacies in the woods behind our house. My parents gave me some shade plants to put in my garden, some of which are still there. I remember feeling such a sense of inner peace being out there in my own little world. Around the same time, I remember reading a children's chapter book called Mandy about an orphan girl who sneaks out of the orphanage and finds an abandoned cottage that she spruces up and makes her own. She cleans the inside and sweeps the front stoop, collects cast-off plants from the local nursery to plant in her little garden. I was so captivated by the story and imagined that my fort was a little cottage of my own. As a teenager, I was a vegetarian who didn't like vegetables very much. And then my mom and I read a book by Barbara Kingsolver called Animal Vegetable Miracle. It was my first introduction to the local foods movement and the magic of vegetable farming. Written in the captivating prose of a novelist, this book sparked my imagination and made me want to have a deeper relationship with the food that I ate. I planted my first vegetable garden, and I've been involved with local foods and farming ever since. I learned the term climate grief a couple of years ago. According to the American Psychological Association, people experience climate grief when they notice or anticipate the loss of species, ecosystems, and meaningful landscapes due to acute or chronic environmental change. In many ways, climate grief is similar to other forms of grief, but in some ways it's unique. It's relentless, more abstract than many forms of grief, and there's a lot of uncertainty about the scale of loss to anticipate. Although I didn't always have a name for it, climate grief is something I have experienced for a long time. Even as a young kid, I was worried about warmer winters, melting ice caps, and species extinction. My family was proactive about talking about our carbon footprint, and we had a Toyota Prius before anyone else we knew. Individual action was the only way I knew to deal with my anxiety, which often came in the form of walking to the library rather than getting a ride from my folks. When I got serious about pursuing a career in agriculture in college, my decision was partly motivated by a desire to be involved in addressing climate change. It was climate adjacent, but not too specific. Choosing a career path directly addressing climate change felt like starting a relationship with a terminal cancer patient. Subconsciously, I thought that if I didn't look climate change directly in the eye, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle, though. I'm going back to school this fall to pursue a master's in business, and as I contemplate a career pivot, I'm realizing that my original passion for addressing climate change is still there. I'm committed to staying in the field of agriculture, but now I'm looking climate change right in the eye. I still experience climate grief on a regular basis, but my years out in the field and my regular hikes have helped me to build a resilience that I didn't have before. And my agriculture training has exposed me to the abundance of nature in ways that make me feel genuinely hopeful. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that I've had easy access to natural spaces all of my life, and not everyone has that. A lot of people don't have the time or resources to seek out immersive natural experiences. And we also know that natural public spaces are not equally safe for everyone. When I lived in Minneapolis in a third-floor apartment, I missed being in nature. But the amazing thing about nature's abundance is that it's everywhere. Even in the most concrete-covered urban environments, seeds find purchase and sprout, and squirrels and pigeons eke out a living. They may not be the most beautiful things, but you got to admire them for their scrappiness. I would obviously be lying if I said I get as much out of seeing dandelions growing in a sidewalk or watching a squirrel dumpster diving as I do a hike in the woods far from the city. Of course I don't. There's something deeply restorative about being immersed in nature. But what I do get from those dandelions and squirrels is a lot of hope for the future. It's a testament to the resilience of nature that so many plants and animals have adapted to not only survive, but thrive in city environments. Anyone who has ever grown a garden knows that anytime there is a disturbance, Mother Nature is standing by, ready to fill in with a riot of weeds. It's no accident that wartime chemicals were reemployed to address weeds and pests in our agriculture system after World War II. Ask any farmer in July, it can feel like a war against the weeds. As scary as some of the impacts of climate change are, there are also astounding accounts of nature's resilience. Remember the early days of the pandemic when the whole world shut down and reports of clean air and clearer water came rolling in? It felt as if nature was shouting, "Recovery is possible if you just give us half a chance." An example that I find so inspiring is the biodiversity in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. In the 33 years since the Chernobyl disaster, in the absence of human interference, biodiversity has exploded. Studies show that not only is there a huge diversity of mammals, birds, amphibians, fish, and insects, but also that the impact of radiation has been far less than expected. In some cases, scientists even believe that organisms are already showing adaptive responses to the presence of radiation. Another example is the biodiversity in the soil. I'm not a soil scientist, but I've studied soil enough to know that we have barely scratched the surface of what there is to know about the universe under our feet. 1 teaspoon of healthy soil contains between 100 million and 1 billion microbes. Here's some context. If you counted the microbes in a teaspoon of soil at a rate of 1 microbe per second, it would take 6 years without breaks to count them all. I'm going to say that one more time in case you missed it. If you counted the microbes in 1 teaspoon of soil at a rate of 1 microbe per second, it would take 6 years without breaks to count them all. Did your brain just explode? The life in the soil provides essential functions for the plants that we need for our survival, for food, shelter, and ecosystem health. Many of these microbes we don't even know yet. The potential for human partnership with bacteria and fungi is mostly untapped, and that gets me excited. While we know relatively little about the relationships and organisms in the soil, what we do know is what supports soil health and robust microbial populations and what depletes them. We know that healthy soil stores carbon, and that soil building and conservation will be essential pieces of the puzzle in addressing climate change. These examples of the creativity and abundance found in nature are, for me, a bulwark against the onslaught of doom and gloom we hear on a daily basis. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's an existential threat. That hasn't changed. But my ability to believe in the resilience of humans and nature working together expands when I connect with nature's abundance. In an article from the American Psychological Association, a recommended strategy for coping with climate grief is spending time in nature. Quote, "We have more and more evidence that is good for your mental health, and it is helpful to remind people that nature is a source of strength as well as a source of anxiety," unquote. Many of us have grief about what we're doing to our planet. It's heartbreaking to hear about the fires, storms, and extinctions that are becoming so commonplace. Even as we fear for the future of life itself, spending time in natural spaces can restore our spirits and give us hope. Take time to see the ways that nature has of healing itself. Look for what's not going wrong. Be present. May it be so, and amen.
Number 21, for the beauty of the earth.
if we lived only in human society, with its cruelty and fear, its apathy and exhaustion, what a puny existence that would be. But instead, we live and move and have our being here in this curving, soaring world. May we acknowledge our grief and our very uncertain future. There is much to lose. Let it be an invitation into a deeper relationship with the world around us. Only by being in right relationship with nature will we find the resilience and resolve to face the challenges that lie ahead. May it be so, and amen.